Hello everyone, how are you? Today's breaking news. The budget watchdog has slashed its forecast for economic growth by half as Rachel Reeves unveiled a £14 billion package to repair the UK economy that includes cuts to welfare. Delivering her spring statement to the House of Commons on Wednesday, the Chancellor blamed increased global uncertainty as the Office for Budget Responsibility have its forecast for growth in gross domestic product in 2025 from 2% to just 1%. Ms. Reeves also confirmed a further squeeze on the welfare budget, building on cuts to the disability and incapacity bill set out earlier this month, with the package now expected to save £4.8 billion rather than the more than £5 billion in 2029-30 hoped for by ministers. In a damning revelation, the government's own impact assessment said after the announcement that an estimated 250,000 people, including 50,000 children, would be pushed into relative poverty by the end of the decade as a result of welfare reforms. Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride accused Ms. Reeves of having tanked the economy, as he said she chose to be reckless with fiscal headroom. Extra benefit cuts are devastating, says Mind. Mental health charity Mind has said the extra benefit cuts announced by the Chancellor are devastating and will push more people into crisis. Chief Executive Dr. Sarah Hughes said, "People are telling us that they are so worried about the situation they'd be left with no choice but to end their own life. It's a political choice to try fixing the public finances by cutting the incomes of disabled people, including people with mental health problems. Benefits are a lifeline for so many people. Cuts will push people into poverty. This is policy making by numbers, with little recognition of the impact on real people's lives." Our Federation of Local Minds across England and Wales sees the consequences of these decisions every day. We are always here to support people, but we can't do it alone. We urgently call on the government to rethink these plans. We can and must do better. 250,000 people pushed into poverty by welfare reforms, government says. An estimated 250,000 people, including 50,000 children, would be pushed into relative poverty by the end of the decade as a result of welfare reforms, the government's own impact assessment has said. The document, published on Wednesday after Chancellor Rachel Reeves delivered her spring statement in Parliament, said, "The potential impact of these reforms on poverty projections has been estimated using a static microsimulation model. Using this model, we estimate there will be an additional 250,000 people, including 50,000 children, in relative poverty after housing costs in 2029-30 as a result of model changes to Social Security compared to the baseline projections." The document stated the estimate does not include the impact of the £1 billion annual funding by 2029-30 for measures supporting people into work, which we expect to mitigate the poverty impact. It added that its analysis does not take into account new protections for those with severe lifelong conditions that the government intends to bring forward. Reeves' tinkering does not match growth rhetoric, says think tank. Growth Commission Chairman Shankar Singham said, "While we applaud the government's pro-growth rhetoric and commitment to tearing down regulatory barriers, ministers must be judged by their actions rather than their words." On present form, after two successive quarters with contractions in GDP per capita growth, the yardstick against which to judge whether living standards are improving for British families, the rhetoric is failing to live up to reality. What Rachel Reeves announced today amounts to tinkering at the edges when a fundamental reshaping of policy in numerous areas is required. Rachel Reeves is right to identify that we live in a changing world, and the imposition of tariffs by the new U.S. administration would certainly have a wide-ranging impact. But that provides an even more compelling reason to commit to a comprehensive trade deal with the U.S. and undertake widespread domestic regulatory reform as part of an effort to restore the UK's historic economic strength. Ukraine's defense against Russia's invasion has seen the biggest change in warfare since the invention of the aeroplane. Kyiv now rules the Black Sea without a navy to speak of because of its innovations in the use of drones on, above, and below the surface of the sea. Ukraine produces almost all the new technology it needs for fighting this new kind of warfare, closely followed by Russia. The two nations are now years ahead of even countries like the US and Israel in the development and the real-world use of drones. Whether in Russia or Ukraine, scientists are now rushing to develop autonomous unmanned vehicles, aircraft, and boats to allow these weapons to bypass attempts to block their command and control systems, which currently rely on radio waves or fiber optic guidance systems. Ukraine has a navy, an air force, and an army, as well as a newly minted unmanned system force, which only works using these new weapons. The UK and all other NATO countries are scrambling to learn the lessons of Ukraine's defense against Russia and is likely to heavily invest in Kyiv's efforts because that's where the innovations are ahead of the rest of the world.